persons interested on the agenda are present to hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Nell Richin.
Here.
Ellen Ranch, Jeanette, Linda, Tim Savarino,
Here.
Ann Coombs,
Here.
Mark Field,
Here.
Dennis Stokes Scarlett,
Here.
Kathy Richin,
Here.
and identify yourself.
Ginger Shaman.
Steve Rothke, Landmark House.
Oh. Steve Arnold, an observer.
Thank you. Good morning. This open meeting of the Community Preservation Committee is being conducted remotely and in person, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Good morning, Eleanor. Anything that you may broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website. Unless otherwise noted, the public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, can we cover some ground rules effective in clear conduct of business and to ensure active meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. As they conclude their remarks, the chair will down the line of members provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold them in the small folder. Please remember to mute the phone and computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak in the way that's generally active minutes. Any response to what is the chair here support you and your name before speaking. Remember to engage in conversation with other members. Please up to the chair. Continue to identify yourself. After the words spoken, chair will go for a public comment. And each vote has been taken by a roll call vote. Thank you for listening to the day's script. The first item on the agenda today is the entertaining motion to approve the agenda, which has specific.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor? Roll call. Neville,
Yes.
Eleanor,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Mark, and the chair votes aye.
What about me? Hold it.
Linda Williams is there. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Linda Williams is there as well.
Aye,
Okay.
and if the people can speak a little louder, because of that room, the acoustics are very bad. It's hard to hear everything everybody's saying on Zoom.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the first item for historic preservation, and we have representatives from the Nantucket Community Service Landmark House, the Grossman Ring Group, Steve Rothke, President, and Georgie Shaman. Welcome. Take chairs, and as you understand the process, we have set up a situation where you have sort of between 15 to 20 minutes to flesh out your presentation. You don't have to take that amount of time. Once we get through that, we ask you lots of questions that we will have with the presentation. So welcome this morning, and as Linda asked, please speak loudly.
Where's the microphone?
Right there.
It can see you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Steve Rothke, I'm president of the Landmark House Board. And I'd like to introduce Georgie Sharman, who is representing Ella Finn, who is our executive director. Many of you probably know that Ella has gone across the pond. She's now living in Ireland. We had kept her on as executive director for this year. We brought in Georgie as our manager. She does the day-to-day. She's the day-to-day administrative presence at Landmark House. And the board has unanimously approved Georgie assuming the role of executive director as of January 1st, 2023. Georgie actually wrote the grant application that we're going to review this morning. And we're very pleased to have Georgie on board. And she's a familiar face probably to many of you. I want to thank the committee for what you've enabled us to do over the last I guess it's 5 years now. Just quick history. We started with replacing 145 windows with built-in storm windows and screens. The following year, we replaced all of the exterior trim and gutters using Hvac, which is basically much stronger than wood, has a much longer longevity. HDC approved it, which we were happy about. Jim Lyden put a new roof on the main building the following year. This year, you've probably noticed if you've gone by the facility, we reshingled the entire exterior of both buildings. So we now have a watertight envelope, if you will. And the final project that we envision doing for the time being is to replace the roof on Grossman wing. We have had work done on that roof twice, and we still have problems with it. So I'm going to let Georgie introduce the plan for replacing the Grossman wing roof. Georgie?
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We're just very grateful that you have, helped us in the past and hopefully in the future with our capital projects. We're funded federally by HUD and RD, but their funds don't stretch to help us maintain, structurally our historic components with our housing facility, but we appreciate the support for low-income housing. And so we hope you'll help us. We have the estimate from Jim Lyden, and he's ready to help us replace the roof. We had to do some patchwork after the last storm. So yeah, we're hoping to complete that next year.
Questions?
I just want, I
Yes.
didn't hear what you said. You said you were funded previously by,
We're funded by HUD and RD
Okay, all right,
federally,
I
but
didn't hear you.
they don't stretch to, help with big projects
Okay.
for the building.
In terms of looking at this, did you talk to other potential contractors?
Well, we just got the main estimate from Jim Lyden just because we had him previously, and we had that work done previously by somebody else, and they didn't do a great job. So we wanted him to help us, and he had helped us come and patch expediently after the storm. So we really only had that estimate from him, but because he's amazing.
Right, okay. Questions from other commissioners?
I do have a question, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if you can see when the hand goes up. The section of the building we're talking about is the newer section from the late 80s, early 90s.
Yes.
And that was my only, I know we've got an obviously affordable housing quotient here. That was my only concern about doing it under renovation or restoration, is because it's not the older section that was moved in from Pulpus. It's the newer section that was built to increase the amount of units in the building. So that was my only question to you, Mr. Chair, is about that issue.
Well, if I may,
Yes.
we just used CPC funds to reshingle, or we did all the sidewalls in both the main building and the Grossman room. So I think there's a precedent for using CPC money for the new wing. It's attached to the original structure.
I just wanted to put that on the record that we have had established a precedent of doing windows, shinglings, things like that in that other section, in case it ever comes up, because it is clearly not part of the original structure. But if we've established that precedent, I just want to make sure we make the same findings.
Okay,
That works for me.
I'm good.
any questions or thing? I can't see the hands from any other commissioners.
Yeah, maybe.
Diane?
I think that Mr. Lyden is an excellent roofer and can handle problems that come up. So if it's a choice, I think they're correct in choosing him. He's proved himself to be able to work with many ways of a roof. So I'm just saying, I think that was a good choice.
No?
I'm sorry, I'm glad you have that. Just for my own thing. You said it's been repaired before, but you had problems with it. Was it structural problems?
No,
So just the way the job was done?
we got, we looked for cheap and we got cheap,
Okay. uh-huh.
and it was a mistake.
Oh,
We should have used somebody with greater experience in roofing. That
okay.
was done about, I'm gonna say 8 years ago, maybe
Mhm.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
And we've been patching it almost every
Almost.
year.
okay.
Roof has got 15 to 20 year lifespan. But
So was that the first repair since the 2001 construction of that way?
Pardon me?
Was the initial repair 8 years ago, the first repair or work on the roof since the construction in 2001?
8 years ago, I think we replaced one half of we did, we played the side that would, I guess it would be the north side, because gets the most weather.
Hmm.
And we didn't patch it, we redid the entire side of that roof. But as I said, it was not done in a great manner. And we have a lot of confidence in Jim Lyden.
Right, yes. Yeah, my only concern was so that whatever he does, what was done before is not gonna compromise the new thing.
We're
Okay,
gonna strip everything off and
Mhm.
start anew.
okay. Okay, thank you.
are there any other questions with respect to this application?
No.
Is there any other information that anyone wants from these applicants before we have our hearing?
Diane? I think Diane has her
Diane?
hand up.
No, do I have my hand up? I said what I had to say.
I have a quick question. It's probably in here somewhere, but do you have an idea of how long the project will take?
2 weeks.
Oh, it's quick.
It's gonna be done in the spring.
Good, so disruption wise.
Yeah, obviously, we can't start until town meeting.
Right.
So it'll be sometime in probably May that we'll get it done.
Okay. Hearing no other questions or any additional information, I want to thank you for your presentation. And we will get back to you after we hold our hearings with respect to our recommendations for the application of property.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is for the thrift shop. And the representative here.
Yes. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning. Trust you enjoyed reading our big document there. So, I'm Kathy Ward, for those of you who don't know me, and this is Renee Hanlon. Renee is the clerk for the thrift shop. Our president of the board is on jury duty in New York, so apologies. And so I got back last night and was going to be on Zoom, and appreciate this opportunity to be live with you. And I think before we get started, it's important for us to say how much you guys have done for us, not just financially, but giving us the courage and the boldness to attack this building, to preserve this building, because we didn't. We had a handyman taking care of this business for a long time until I heard about the CPC grant in 2015, that was an option, and met with several of the members of this committee and with the NPT, and found carpenters and painters and
other construction people, I'm sorry if I'm putting anybody out on the Zoom, who were experts in their field. We used the North Bennett Street School when we did our first improvements to the building. We pushed in the east wall. It was going out into the driveway. We had to take the rubble foundation down and use old methods of pushing the building back into place, and then had to take out beams inside, put steel beams up into the woodwork so that you're not seen in any way. The building was not supported properly in the additions to the building that were, added back in the 1800s, nor was the front part of the building supported correctly. So we've made great strides, and it's been thanks to all of you to give us that courage to move forward. We have maintained a line item in our budget every year so that for portions that are not covered by the CPC, we're able to do those. And there's certainly some enhancements to the building that we've made that are certainly covered under our budget. And Renee just left the budget meeting, so if there are any questions, and she can certainly, answer those in specific. But this year, we're hoping to, we found a floor in the attic that was beginning to move a little bit, and it caused concern because we have a lot of merchandise up there, plus we have volunteers working up there in the attic in the summer. And so Michael Gall, who's been our go-to carpenter, and I think you're all familiar with him, has recommended cleaning some of that attic floor up there to pull those, what's the right word, Neville? Anyway, we want to cleat the joist. I'm
The
sorry.
joist. Oh,
The
you
joist.
want carpenters
It just
stuff?
won't come in, I'm sorry about that. The
It's
joist
fine.
together, and the rubble foundation on the front left side of the building is deteriorating, and it had been repaired in the past before we started digging into all of this with just plain old plaster of Paris, nothing that was, historically correct. And so we are working to get that redone. There's a soft spot in the floor that would have been a pass-through from a kitchen area to a pantry that's kind of giving like this, so that will be shored up from the basement side. The front of the building needs, we painted it in 2015, it needs repainting, it needs scraping, repainting, and also the woodwork, the trim work around the windows underneath it has begun to rot, so that needs to be scraped, patched, and painted and repaired as well. And then there's still some ceiling peeling that's taken place. We cannot find the source of that water that's coming. The roof's been checked, the windows we've worked on. So that will be scraped after Michael takes another look at what's going on, where that water could be coming from. And then on what we're planning to do is, we think that there are beautiful hardwood floors under that hallway as you first come into the building. So we're going to refinish those floors on our own nickel, if possible. They're nice floors. If not, we'll put the carpet back down. But we will put the carpet back on the stairs because it's a safety issue going up and down the stairs. And the last but not least is there is a, we own the parking lot on Hussey Street as well. The thrift shop, we outright own all of this property. And we're all getting older and knees give out. So going up and down stairs, bringing heavy loads of stuff is a problem. So we worked with the NPT, who has a deed restriction on the property. We've had plans drawn up, and they've agreed to, as has the HDC, for us to put a temporary loading dock. It will be something that will connect the Hussey Street walkway that's at the end of our driveway to the back porch, so that you can come straight across there. It'll be a little bit of a diagonal, but you'll come straight across there, rather than having to load things, go down the stairs, come around, come up, or do the same thing in the front. Come in the front door, go down the hall, go down the basement. So that's our plan for this year. I'm happy to take any questions.
I just have one comment.
Sure.
Part of what we're allowed to do with respect to historic buildings is to provide restoration as opposed to maintenance.
Okay.
Because there's a very significant difference between those two. Maintenance is not allowable under the CPC Act, but restoration is. When I take a look at the painting quote, the issue that I have is that is certainly doable, but when we did this with the UU Church, what we did was the painting was to try to restore the colors and the walls to what might have originally been there. So if that can be specifically defined within the scope of what the painting does, then I think that that falls within the purview of what we're able to do as a CPC. But if you're just going to be repainting and stuff like that, we cannot provide that for you. So it just takes a little creativity on your part to be able to do that, because it's not hard to do in terms of finding the original colors and you're talking already about restoring some of the original plasterwork. So I feel very comfortable that you can structure your request to us and the quote that you finally provide for us as an additional item that we'll ask you to deliver to us before we get together in terms of voting on the award.
We will get Rudy to start scraping that right this afternoon.
Yeah.
We'll scrape it down and find them. Yeah.
That's good.
My hand up if you can't see it.
All
Sorry,
right, you guys that are on the screen, please yell at me. I just can't see it.
I agree with your take on the painting. A lot of times when you're dealing with old plaster or old wood, painting is the only way to seal it and to protect it. So it can be done under restoration.
We have done that with the UU Church.
Yeah,
Significant amount of money. Yeah.
And I'm glad you've set up, because when you first came to us years ago, for those who haven't been on that long, we did ask you to set up a fund, a maintenance fund on an annual basis. And I'm happy to see that that's going on, because I think that'll only help you, and it will help us also make a grant to you guys that you are doing something to maintain your own building. I know it had gotten away from you guys for decades before that, and we're sort of nickel and diming it every year, but I ask you to come back every year for something else to preserve that building, because it was so far not preserved when you first came to us that I think we are making great strides on that building, and it's a beautiful building. And one of the requirements for a CPC is that the public have access. I think we know the public has access when the line goes down the street and around the corner. Yeah. Yeah. So I think people know that they can get in that historic structure. So thank you very much.
Linda, thank you for your comments, because it did have Band-Aids all over it. And I mean, scary Band-Aids when Michael Galt started pulling that stuff back.
Yeah.
I don't think our insurance company would have even covered us had he seen what we have been, the conditions we've been working under. So it's a really big thank you, the NPT and the CPC, for giving us the courage.
Definitely. Makes a huge
So
difference.
we haven't asked for a grant since 2019. We're down to $1,279. We'll spend that with Rudy today to scrape down the front.
Exactly.
Are there other questions from any of the commissioners relative to this presentation? Eleanor?
Maybe I missed this, or wasn't paying close enough attention. Is the extension in the back part of your grant request?
Yes,
Okay, so is that something that is allowable within the purview of this of CPC funding?
I didn't see that.
that's the loading dock that I talked.
That should be, because that's access, and accessibility is an area that we are able to, in fact, provide funding for with respect to historic structure.
Good, okay.
Thank you.
Make sure.
No, thanks for asking the question, and we're all on the same page.
That's good.
I have another question, Mr. Chairman, vis-a-vis that particular comment.
And then,
You've got to be careful of the rise, because if you're over 30 inches off the ground, it's going to require railings.
It
under
will
the
have,
code.
the plans call for railing, Linda. What we'll take is the railing from the
Parking.
parking area will be one way, and then the railing from the porch on the back. We're going to try to use that same railing if we can. If we can't, it will be new railing that's exactly like that railing. So the HCC did approve that look.
The only other question I have for you is, have you thought about a ramp, a quote unquote handicap ramp? Because we can legally pay for that as well.
We considered that, however, there is no way in the world that even if you, the doors in that whole building are not wide enough, and then if you also to go anywhere other than the first floor, we have no elevator, so there's just no way to use a wheelchair or walker in that building.
Well, no, that wasn't what I was getting at. A ramp from the parking space down and then up into the building. It doesn't have to
So
do anything
we don't
else.
have enough run space.
Okay.
That was, Ken,
Yes, Diane.
I was going to say, in that particular application in front of the HDC, we reviewed the space and not ramp, but passageways into the building to get them to have the best space and to stay looking the same way as it does and what isn't visible around back. So it has been approved and quite thoroughly worked out. It was, I don't remember what month it was, but it was quite some time ago. So we have approved it and thought it was a good job.
Perfect.
Thank you, Diane, and thanks for your comments that night. I happened to hear them. Thank you.
Anything else that anyone has with respect to questions or additional information that they might need to see? Mark?
Kathy, who holds your deed restriction on the property?
NPT,
Who?
Preservation Trust.
Okay.
Nantucket Preservation Trust.
And they signed off.
And I believe there's copies in the office.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. All of the deed restrictions that are held with respect to any awards that we made, copies are available at the CPC office. So,
Thank you, by the way,
Fine.
for doing that.
So what I want to get back from you before our meeting is a new document with respect to the painting,
Got it.
indicating that what you're going to be doing is restoration and the nature of it, so that we fully comply within what we were able to do under the act.
Thank you very much. And when is your next meeting? Just so I'll have it to you.
We
Long
we-
before
we would-
then.
We would like it, if it could be back within a week,
Got it.
okay?
Got it.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
You're very welcome. And Glenna, I received a text from Dawn saying that she'd get here as soon as possible.
Okay.
And I also received a long text from John
My keys.
apologizing. He said he had a very significant family matter that he needs to deal with today, and as a result, is unable to be here today. And our next person is
Thank
Paul's chair.
They're not on until 9:40.
Glenna, I'd be happy to have coffee and donuts. Wicked Island Bakery, you said,
I'm gonna go move my car that time,
Oh, yeah.
because I parked it.
Yeah, you have 10 minutes.
There's no spot.
No such place anymore.
I know. What is the deal?
Be careful they don't lock you in
What
there.
is the deal with Lucky's?
I think they sold it, I think.
What's happening with Lucky is the fact that the food pantry is
Yeah.
moving into.
Oh, that's
Oh.
good. That means reuse, reuse, reuse.
So they have the whole building.
they bought it.
They have the whole building?
I don't think that they. All right, we are here in slightly ahead of schedule. As we made you aware, you guys have actually 30 minutes because you're early. Well,
We'll go away and come back.
But what we do is ask you to spend 10 to maybe 10, 12 minutes sort of fleshing out the items, point out the issues.
Sure.
And you either, and then leave it open for questions.
Right.
Additional information, or questions that we have. So please introduce yourself.
Right.
And then speak to the cone there in the table, loud enough so people on Zoom can hear you.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
My name is Bob Felch and I have Martin McCarroll next to me, and I am one of the two wardens at St. Paul's of the vestry, and the vestry is our board, and you've heard before, I'm sure, from St. Paul's many times. I have the history of applications here at CTC. And I would just like to acknowledge our dear late friend, Joel McIntyre, who we all miss and adored. And if we had the power, we would nominate him for sainthood. Because It was quite a remarkable person. So in fact, he completed the last 6 applications to CPC. And I started with some of his former documents and used some of them, and one of them got the wrong paragraphs in them, so I put the correct paragraphs in there. But that's the reason for that. And I dropped it off the planner, and so I'm sorry I'm breaking the rules, but
Not at all.
great. So I joined the vestry about 2 years ago as a warden, and the vestry is in charge, of course, of financial management.
Yes.
Can you hear all right?
Yes.
Okay. And fiscal plant management. And
I am a meeting at 2 o'clock to pick up the beds.
okay. So
Can we mute Diane, please? Somebody?
I'm sorry, sorry.
So when I joined up, okay, and then we have Father Max Wolf, who some of you may have met, and he joined us about 4 years ago as our rector. And prior to that, we had some challenges. And when he came to us, we had we were collecting about $250,000 of annual pledges for our stewardship. Stewardship's always launched about this time of year. So that was 250,000 5 years ago. And our target for next year, which we just launched last week, is 525,000. So we have doubled our annual donations under Max's leadership. And he's quite a wonderful addition to St. Paul's, and our spiritual leader, and the vestry and Max, of course, work together on running the church. So when I joined, this guy actually turned to me and said, Bob, you moved a lighthouse a while back, and how about you take the final steps to get this tower completely restored to the point where we don't have to worry about it anymore. And once we do that, we also need to restore the entryway to the church, the main entryway, which we call an Hvac, or some people call a vestibule, because there is considerable damage to that entire infrastructure there from all the water intrusion over the past 15 to 20 years. Much of your past funding that relates to what we call the bell tower was specifically focused on eliminating the water intrusion. And we're probably 99% there. This particular project has some flashing work that needs to be done on the roof that surrounds the tower. The last water intrusion occurred on May 13th of 2021. I was there, I saw it, and it was clearly a result of the flashing issue. So again, 99% of the water intrusion is behind us, and now it's time to restore the parts of the church that everybody sees when they walk in. And of course, the entryway is very important. We sort of have a theme at St. Paul's that our doors are open to everybody. And but when you walk in there, it's musty, the walls are falling apart. And then when you walk into the nave or the main part of the church and you look back at that vestibule, all the walls are damaged and water stained. So this project does all the final work on the tower and then restores the entryway. When I came in, there was still talk about structural integrity for the tower, which made me very nervous. And we hired BCA, which is a preservation specialist consultant. And we also hired Cirrus, which is an engineering consultant. And those two firms, we engaged them to come and do a full assessment and give us not only a report, but prepare an RFP or a bid spec document. And the lion's share of this is bid specs, which would put you to sleep. But I wanted to include that just so you know that these folks are professionals and they dot all the i's and cross all the t's. So we have a proposal. We have a budget. We went to my friends at ICC Commonwealth, who I know are currently doing a restoration project at the top of the lighthouse. And I worked with them on the relocated Sankaty and restored it again with considerable support from CPC. So what you've supported to date is predominantly addressing the mortar issues. In 1901, they didn't know what the proper mortar was to be used for this kind of construction, and over the years it's deteriorated. So we hired an expert in restoration, Fabio. And Fabio spent several years working on the tower, all facades of the tower, and 3 of the 4 facades of the church, restoring all the mortar. And he did quite a bit of work inside the upper part of Belltown. So now we need major construction work to finalize all the work that is needed above the ground floor. And that's detailed in here. I did some punching of the numbers. Anyway, ICC gave us a budget. And it was, they did go to subs and get quotes, so it wasn't just sort of scratching notes. So of this proposal that they gave us, and let me just explain one thing. After I submitted this, BCA and Sears Engineering and I had a detailed meeting with ICC, with Tyler Finkel, and said, let's go over the budget and really break it down. And we were able to knock about 10 to 12% off of his original quote. So we're down about 150,000 from what is in here, which gets us around $1,050,000 to $1,060,000 instead of $1,200,000. So that's good. I'm a little bit anxious about our pricing because we're going out for bid in January. And we know about the macroeconomic issues going on in the world related to inflation and supply chain issues. And so I have put a fudge factor in here. I shouldn't call it fudge factor, but a 10 to 15% escalation of cost factor in this. So I'm still focused on this 1.4 million as a total project cost for St. Paul's. And as you know, we're asking for $850,000. This is also part of a bigger effort on St. Paul's part to address other capital needs for building. We've got, I think, 5 structures on that property. But in our main building, we've got a basement called Garden Hall, and we've supported our new entryway there, the Dominion entryway, and the elevator that we have there. But we really didn't restore the Garden Hall gathering area. And then the parish house, which is next door, is pretty much the way it's been since we did a major project 15 plus years ago. So those are 2 efforts that will be part of this bigger fundraising effort. So there is a capital campaign that hasn't started. There are now maybe 12 or 13 people that know about it. It's definitely not something we're talking about publicly yet. And when you have a campaign like this, you have a quiet phase where you go to prospective high-end donors to ask for money. Before you launch the public campaign, you've got a foundation of money. So for this proposal here that you reviewed, 62% of it is for the tower above the ground level. 34% is for the vestibule or the narthex and the interior walls. There's a part, Linda's not here.
No, she's on the screen.
Oh, hi, Linda. Sorry. I took Linda up in the tower and also down in the basement. In the basement, there's a brick vaulted area like this below the flooring for the entry. The flooring has a lot of cracked marble on it, which will be replaced. But the underpinning is impossible to look at until you pull up the floor. So there's a discoverable there. Like what kind of work do we have to do on the underflooring and then on that brick floor below? So again, that's part of this total number of 1.4 million. There are a few discoverables in the project, and that's typical of these kind of projects where the contractor gets in there and says, okay, we need to do this, and then you get into change orders. And so anyway, that's the split above and then below. Hello. And then I wanted to just comment that 10% of this entire project is still addressing that latent water intrusion issue. So again, it's that flashing, the cost for the flashing and the slate work is that percentage. And historically, we've gone to local contractors, which is a normal thing when you're dealing with maintenance issues. But when you deal with a capital initiative like this, you really have to rely on your GC. And while we encourage them to hire local subs, you need specialists in a lot of these cases. So my guess is that we'll be going off on a specialist for slate roofing. And the fellow we used here is no longer in the business. His son is now doing it. But we've lost that skill set here on Nantucket. The project is April to October of next year. So again, bid January, have responses by February 1st. We expect to have 3 or 4 responses, and we'll go from there. Martin is in a position to talk about the cash flow issues and needs. If you have questions about that, we've got a pretty strong cash position right now. We've got a line of credit. We're going to be doing this campaign, so money will come in. The split between July 1, which is your fiscal year, right? The start July 1, is about 40% will be incurred before that time of this total amount. The rest after. And we feel that we're in a position to underwrite and cover all of that. We understand that you're on a reimbursement model, which is fine. So we don't really have concern about that. And, the campaign will start at some point and we'll have some funding there, but we're really relying mostly on a line of credit and our cash flow. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I should talk to you about.
Would you flesh out the sort of community work that is done in the church?
Yeah.
As apart from the religious activity.
That's right. Yeah.
That the community aspect of
It's huge.
what St. Paul's is doing is very important in terms of the reasoning why we can fund
That's
the
right.
restoration.
And it relates to that open door idea. We have accelerated our what is called outreach efforts in the community in the last 4 or 5 years, mostly under Father Max. And we are now expending roughly 10% of our annual budget on supporting our outreach. Much of our outreach is really it's volunteer work. It's the volunteer work leads, and then we finance those efforts. So in fact, that's why a number of the letters are from health and human services providers who we are supporting. Typically, historically, we get letters from people who are about preservation, but I thought this time it would make sense to have a safe place in Fairwinds and a number of these organizations that we support write letters in support of us. So we are a leading player, I would say, on Nantucket in supporting people in need in the community. We have a meals program that is called St. Paul's Suppers, and every Wednesday evening we deliver between 85 and 100 meals to people who are in need. Some of them are shut-ins. It all came out of COVID. We were delivering to households that were suffering from COVID, either for various reasons. And in those cases, we would put the meals on the front stoop and then run back to the car, call on the cell phone, And that program is now 2+ years old and is very important for us. We've got 15 to 20 volunteers who pack the meals and we deliver them. Tomorrow we'll be delivering, I think, 90 meals. A chunk of them go to a safe place who then deliver them to their clients, and we don't need to know who those people are, and we can't know who those people are. So there's a level of confidentiality that's required there. We support the staff at Fairwinds, and we also support their clients. We have a laundry love program where we give out laundry cards to people who are in need, and they can go to Holgate's and use the laundry cards in the washing machines and the dryers. That was very volunteer intensive before COVID. Now it's less so, but we're going to get back to that. We do things with the community school and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few other programs.
We provided snacks in the community school. We started a reading program. And Bob understates the actual cost now of our arch program is almost 15% of our budget. Budget's about $600,000+ a year. That's increased, by the way, since Max.
Our budget.
Yeah, about 450,000 was then. But we're spending over $100,000 a year in community programs. Some of that is funded by third parties because they choose to support it. But our budget right now is almost 15% of our budget is going for outreach and community activities.
And another ministry, which is different from outreach, is music. And we are a center of music, and we have a wonderful organist, Joe Hammer, and the organ ball ended at St. Paul's this past weekend, and there were 200 people there. It was incredible. So lots of people come into St. Paul's for various reasons. And again, every time I go into that front entryway, I cringe. We need to really fix this place up. And it's not just sprucing up, it's sort of nature thing.
It's not directly relevant to this project. We have a commercial kitchen in Gardner Hall. When Gardner Hall was, when the Dormy entrance was expanded, which would be much longer ago than I remember, I think it's 2014 or 2013. We put a commercial kitchen in the Gardner Hall. And that kitchen is now being used actually, we're actually preparing the foods that we deliver for the meals program in that space. And the whole access to the church is through that front entrance to the church. And it's just not the way you want people coming to the church. And they're out there. Probably are some safety issues. I'm not going to make a big thing, but it's been severely damaged because of the settlement.
So I made a comment about the structural integrity of the tower. It is structural, sound. And the engineers gave us that answer, which was of course a relief. But these kind of structures have two walls. They have an inner and an outer wall. And there are ways of connecting those. I remember when we moved the lighthouse, we had to pour concrete into the lower, in between the two walls of that structure to keep it together. And we lifted it and moved it. High rises have two skins on them. And again, there are ways to adhere those. The interior infrastructure of this tower is sound. And there's a little bulging, which you may have read here, that we can correct on the north side. We don't need to do the other ones, but it has nothing to do with the structural integrity of the building. The other point about this, the budget that you mentioned, is we have a rigorous maintenance program for St. Paul's for all of our buildings, because we never want to get to a point where we're deferring maintenance the way we have in the past. Some of that's financial, or has been for financial reasons. So a lot of our annual operating expenses go to maintenance of all of our buildings.
So I'm going to turn to questions from the commissioner.
Good.
I have my hand up, Mr. Chairman. I did have an occasion to crawl up the ladder and then up the stairs and then up the ladder to get to the very top of the tower. I support everything Bob has said. This has been my project from the very beginning, so I don't even remember the first year. Maybe I was with Dual for a long time. Miss him terribly. And I believe Bob and his group are just as good a steward of that building as Dual was. And he lived and breathed that building. But I wanted to add a couple of things. I did see the damage. It's very clear when you're looking at it where the damage is from the intrusion, the bulging. I took a lot of pictures of my own. I do support this absolutely 100%. I think it's probably one of the last things that we have to do on the building to get it completely renovated and restored. As far as the public access, I've just been standing out front looking at the outside of the building. We saw several groups come in just to look at the windows. So it is published in various tourist things about these Tiffany windows and the other maker of the other windows that are not Tiffany. And so public comes in and out of that building, so they have full access of that building to go look at the architectural uniqueness of the inside of that building, as well as the windows. So it's not a question of not being able to access an historic structure, and it is an historic structure for many reasons. And I did, as I said, I did see the damage. I did see what's necessary to have happen. There are some bolts on the inside, from the inside wall to the outside to hold it, but it does need repaired to stabilize the exterior of that structure. And the front foyer, the vestibule, you can clearly see that there's a problem there. I've seen a bucket in there before, but there is clearly an issue with that front vestibule. And we were able to get into the basement and under some extent, because there is some sort of an odd cutout. I believe Bob called it the vault over in that corner underneath the vestibule. And there is going to have to be some structural investigation of underneath that front vestibule. It's a very heavy vestibule, and going up the steps probably will need to be reset. Things like that, but it's well worth it. I think it's an astoundingly beautiful structure. But, I do support everything Bob said about its structural integrity and the need to repair it and restore it.
Any comments from any other commissioners, please? Is there any additional information that anyone would want to have them provide to us within the next week before we gather to start to make an allocation?
I did have one question through you, Mr. Chairman, about further information. Bob, I believe you said that the original total cost was 1.2, not 1.4. What is the whole cost of this project? Figures.
The quote or the budget, which we wanted to come to you obviously with a pretty good number, is now standing at about $1,050,000. That is for the construction work. We plan to engage the preservation and engineering consultants as our construction administrators, who will help with all of the regulatory requirements here on Nantucket, will help us with billing. I mean, we've got a very thin office. We have one person basically working in our office. So I'll be, of course, overseeing it, but I want their eyes and ears on this. So there's a fee of $57,000 for them to be the administrator for the project. So that's additive to that. So that's a 1.1. Clearly, I think there are going to be more expenses that will come up during the project. And I also think the bid response, which I mentioned earlier, is likely to be higher than this estimate, just because of supply chain and inflationary issues. And so, I mean,
Does that take it up to the 1.2? You put the 150 back in, it's a 1.2 overall?
Oh, it's 1.4. I would say at the end of the day, it's going to
Okay.
be $1.4 million.
And for our budgeting, cash flow budgeting purposes, we're using $1.4 million.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, then thank you very much.
Thank you.
For a very, very detailed and thoughtful presentation.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
We are almost, we are exactly back on time. If the NHA wants to have two of their representatives there and the third wants to come up.
Is, Glenn Bonesian part of your, part of your,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Good job. Good morning. Introduce yourselves and take 10, 12 minutes to flesh out your request, and we will then have questions for you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. My name is Niles Parker. I'm the Executive Director at the NHA.
And I'm Edwin Rudd, the Director of Facilities for the NHA.
I'm Ben Z, and I'm a development associate at NHA.
And joining us, we have Glenn.
With working with the NHA.
Well, thank you.
You're on.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And Glenn's been working with us now for a number of years on our various properties, and on this one in particular, and working closely with Ed to analyze the situation at Fair Street and helping us put together this package for the grant proposal. The Fair Street Library, located at 7 Fair Street and attached to the Quaker Meeting House, as you may know, was one of the early homes for the NHA. It was built in 1904. And it was conceived at the time to be something kind of innovative and unusual. It was a poured concrete structure and one of the only ones built in New England at that time. In fact, the company that built Harvard Football Stadium, which is considered to be the first poured concrete structure, came down to the island right from that job to build the library. The founders of the NHA did that. In part, the NHA started in 1894, and the Quaker Meeting House on Fair Street was the first home, wood frame building, and they were really cognizant of the fire dangers that a wood frame building presented. And if you've seen photos of the old Quaker Meeting House, you'll see that it was chock-a-block full with artifacts and important documents, artworks, paintings, things like that. And so they realized that they needed to have a fireproof vault, in effect, to better preserve and care for those artifacts. And so in 1904, this structure was built. And in 1904, this structure was built, and again, was considered to be the second at the time, but certainly one of the earliest poured concrete structures anywhere. And so from that standpoint, the fact that it's here in Nantucket and that it has done what it has done is a historically significant building and something that we feel we really want to protect. Fast forward to 2001, and the NHA renovated the space to become the home for the research library, and did a significant amount of work on renovating the inside, creating climate control space, a vault that would care for the documents and the photographs and the paintings, and to create public access to it as well. And since that time, it has served that purpose. It has been the research library, welcoming researchers and the public to different exhibitions, different programs, and caring for those documents, caring for the photographs, caring for the works of art entrusted to the NHA. As I mentioned, Glenn's been working with the NHA and Ed over the last several years, analyzing that building, as that's now been over 20 years since that work was done. And there are some end-of-life issues with some of the systems involved. There are issues with the windows. There are issues with the poured concrete. There are issues with the fire suppression system and the HVAC system. And so we really tried to begin to do a thorough analysis of all those systems and of the building so that we could best figure out how to approach it and make the changes necessary to care for the buildings, which in turn then cares for some of the most important artifacts on the island right now. So what you have in front of you is an application that would allow us to do that. The NHA has already put in quite a bit of money into certain components of the project in terms of new sewer lines and work to the building and preparation for this upcoming project. And then this project specifically would take care of the exterior, looking at the concrete itself. And Glenn and his company have been very helpful in the analysis of the Portland concrete and the way in which it was poured. The windows themselves have significant issues. would be new windows custom built for the building, set back in as they were originally built, echoing that original design, but providing better thermal dynamics and, insulation for that. Also with UV coating that better protects the light from coming into the building. Then looking at the HVAC system, so we have better controls to care for and regulate the temperature that's in those buildings, as well as some issues to the roof and some of the landscape surrounding it. Finally, a fire suppression system. The one that's in there now is, as I say, just over 20 years ago, and is somewhat dated in terms of how one would go about a fire suppression system at this point. We're now looking to put in a preloaded system, so before water gets, immediately sprayed everywhere, there are things that could be done that would protect the artifacts in a better way than the system does now. So this project really at its heart is trying to save this building, yes, and it's an important historic building, and taking it into the next decades and beyond, but at its heart and at the soul of what the NHA is all about, it's really about protecting the artifacts that are there inside and some of the island's most important historic documents. So anything you want to add in terms of the process and where you see this going?
Yeah, I guess before booking with Glenn is I worked with Kathy Taylor doing the research library, the project for that, the Quaker Meeting House, I mean. And so we did the Quaker Meeting House, and when we were doing that, I was looking at the floor of the Quaker Meeting House, and I came to realize that the vault that holds all of our manuscripts, the most important stuff in our collection, doesn't have a concrete ceiling in it. And so that's why I started looking at the building closer, because looking at, how can I do fire suppression for the vault? And then I started to look at the windows, and the windows were getting, you could see they were becoming rotted. And I was like, well, the windows and the concrete have to work together. And I was looking for information on any sort of work that was done on the building. And there's very little work that has been written out on what they've done with the building. So I was like, this is a little bit about me. I need to get somebody who can come in and help me do a complete assessment of the building and do it in a way that we can, in the future, hand off to other people and say, this is what we've done. We've started a whole complete comprehensive study of the building. And that's where I brought in Glenn for his company to do a complete assessment. So all this work is through not only the NHA, but also Glenn's evaluation of the building, bringing in Ben Moore for the window work to look at that and figure out exactly how to get that all done. So that's where I started with, and then Glenn came in and has basically been helping us with everything else. I will say that for the vault, going back to the vault, it is an Energen system that we'd be looking at, which is a system that's a pre-action, but it also has, it's almost like a halon system that's compressed air. It's a certain kind of air that sniffs out fire. If that doesn't work, it sends 2 question marks if there's a flame and if there's smoke, and then it'll set a pre-action system. I think there's only 2 other buildings on Nantucket that has that, the Art Association and another building in town. But from the ceiling heights in that vault, you can't put any more sprinkler heads or anything like that. You can't put extra drywall on it because it's so low. So this would seem like would be the very best system that we would be able to use to protect the collections. And then for the HVAC is that the controls are just out of date. And it's an old XP computer system that runs all the controls, that talks to the system. It says, turn the heat on, turn the pool on. And that's just totally shot. And I can't even find anything on eBay to replace it. So we're looking at a Siemens system, integrated system that not only you can read from the research library, but it will be on all of our phones. We can get real-time data. It'll go to our computers from collections building to the museum itself, so we can keep eyes on it.
Glenn, is there anything you'd like to add about this property and what you've seen as you looked at it?
You know, the reports and everything, I think are really comprehensive, but no, I mean, I think it's been great to work with you in taking this very systematic approach to understanding the history, the changes over time, what it looked like, and to design and to have the support to do the testing that was required to develop a non-destructive test, conservation, restoration, stabilization program that will not only aesthetically blend in with the historic material, but also be physically compatible. So it will, you know, there'll be a long lifespan to these repairs that we make. And I think we're doing it at a good time. Some of the rebar and some of the sections of the facade and the upper cornice have been exposed to a bit of water and then oxidation that has caused openings in the concrete, which is exponential in nature. So the time is right. And I think also the other part of it is that we've been, you know, as we've been talking to you about the development of maintenance programs and HSR. We know what maintenance needs to go into them, and having developed all of these methods and materials will serve as a basis for making those, we're using that information to make repairs into the future. So I appreciate the opportunity to work with you, and I think the project is going to be one we're all proud of.
Thank you, Glenn.
Sure.
As Glenn mentioned, we are working with Glenn and his company to analyze all of our historic properties and have historic structures reports prepared for those properties as well. But this is the first one. And the last thing I would add on this project is that you'll see in the application, the NHA has other funding lines identified, funds committed for the project, and have in fact done some of the work already required for this, such as the sewer work, which was completed earlier this year, the replacement of those pipes and some of the groundwork, landscaping around the exterior of the building. And finally, the building, the process itself, the project has been approved at the HDC and is ready to go forward.
Now, what's the projected timeline for this, if it gets approved?
So I'll let Ed speak a little bit more to that, but we're already starting to talk about getting the windows ordered because they're going to take so much lead time. And so we want to make sure that those are ready to go and ready to be installed once that funding is in, if the funding's in place, if we're lucky enough to get that we can then not miss a beat and get those things installed sooner rather than later.
So June, July, I've talked to the neighbors. The neighbors are all fine with us starting June, July. Our idea, Glenn, you can step in if you want, but is to do the back of the building, not raised court, but the back by Amanda Jacobs.
Right.
And come around to the back side of the building. We have drainage to install, basically just hooking up drain to go to the downspout. We have that land sort of cleared enough for staging to go up. So we do the backside and then that's probably 3 months. So July, August, September, October, November, we'd be starting on raised court side. And that way, twofold is that working on the backside, we figure out exactly how we're doing the windows, you know, how quick we can do the windows in the masonry. And then on the front raised court side, so that way we're not blocking the street so much, and we'll have a good feel for how we're doing everything. And
Mark, I have a question for Glenn. Glenn, I like the idea of replacing the windows back to their original style, but how do you justify that with not justify, but how do you wrap that into the code for insulated windows?
The panes that are going in are insulated now. I mean, not the new ones that will be going in are insulated. I don't, Ed, you know, I don't have the exact, insulation levels on them, but they're just as insulated, if not more, than the ones that are there. And they take on the shape of the original windows that were there at the time of construction. So I think, the primary goal here is to have the building look authentic, yet have age be a part of its appearance. So administration and that sort of going back to that original design and having the windows set back about 6 inches or 8 inches or so, the way they were prior to the 90s project, I think is critical for the appearance of the building. The installation of the windows is, is as good as it can be based on current standards. So I think Ed, we talked about that with Ben more. He had a bit more information than I do about that. I was mostly more with the facade, Ben on the windows, but we had a long conversations. I think there's argon in there as the insulation, and I can't remember what the R factor is. I don't know, Mark, does that answer your question?
Thank you, Glenn. I'm set.
Dawn.
Did I go overboard for you?
I'm just curious, does HTC know that you're putting in insulated windows?
Yes.
They're okay with
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to be sure
Yep.
that was.
We actually took
That
2
was
windows.
clear.
Yeah. We took.
We have-
Tricky.
Diane?
This was approved by the HDC with working out the windows very, very carefully on all 4 sides, depending on which side you saw. And we tried to keep them as original as possible. What couldn't be rebuilt was to be copied. And it has been reviewed and approved by the HDC.
I have my hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Linda?
I have had I've done a lot of work with Ed on reviewing this building for the HDC, the initial HDC application. I would do a lot of pro bono work for the NHA as a life member, and I did the original research and the original window surveys. What's in there right now are Brosco casements. Some of the windows have little signs on them that say "Don't open." So the Brosco, I think they're 9 light maybe. Those Brosco windows are not original. They took the original windows out, which were fixed windows, which is what took so long from the initial application of the HDC to when they finally got approval several months later, because we decided that they wanted to be more towards the original windows, which were very unique windows in a very unique building. It was one of the first buildings of this type architecturally in the country. And it was particularly difficult because it was stuck to an old wood building, which is the Quaker Meeting House. So they've taken great pains to bring in the preservationists and to go back to the original windows, which were a clear light as opposed to these Brosco bad windows, which only last about 20 years, that they barely got out of that. So I'm well aware of how desperately in need they are of replacing these windows, making it tight because of the material that's in the building, as well as fixing the cracks and rehabbing the exterior of the building. So it is in desperate need of this. The windows are in desperate need of being replaced. I think they brought in the right team to do this, having been in the building several times now and gone through all the windows. And 2 of the windows actually aren't there, I believe, anymore because they've disintegrated. So I think this is, I think their presentation was well done.
Do we have any other questions from any of the commissioners with respect to the application? I have not heard of any additional information that will be required from the NHA in order to be able to consider their application. Is that correct? If not, then I want to thank you for a very, very detailed and thoughtful and thorough presentation. We will get back to you once we start our decision-making process with respect to funding.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your consideration and your time.
You guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Glenn.
Bye-bye. Yeah, take care.
I missed you this weekend, Glenn.
We are 1 minute ahead of schedule. Whoa. It is now 10:19 and we welcome Tom and Dennis to come do a presentation to us. Once we get our commission members back. Please take to those chairs.
I've already talked to him. Remember that.
Okay. Nantucket Interfaith Council, we have seen you before. Please identify yourselves and help us understand why there is such an increase in need and what we can do to in fact help address that need.
Okay, my name is Janice Carrero. I'm the executive director of.
Speak with the mic in the center of the.
Where is it? Oh, my name is Janice Carrero. I'm the executive director for Nantucket Food, Fuel, Rental, and now Emergency Medical Travel Assistance. This is Thomas Dixon. He has just come on in July. He is the assistant executive director. And will be working with me for the next year on all of our programs. But the one that interests you most right now is the rental assistance program, of which you have heard our presentation several times before. And you probably know better than we what the housing situation is on the island. I'm sure you've heard it time and time again. The irony is that way back in 2007, when this program, or 2004, when this program was first begun, it was begun because of rising costs of rent because of inflation and not enough year-round housing. And here we are so many years later. And while there have been many improvements in the housing situation, there is still a segment of our population that lives from paycheck to paycheck, works more than one job, pays rents which are more than 30% of their income. And if any little thing happens in their financial life, they are facing eviction, significant back rent. And over the years, we have been there to serve that purpose. Our program is threefold, as many of you know. We do first and last to help move people out of seasonal or substandard housing into safe year-round housing. We assist people with a monthly subsidy of a small amount to maybe just get them over the hump to meet their rental payment. For example, my rent is $2,500. I can pay $1,800 of it, but I'm shy $200 while I don't work in the winter time. So we'll pay the $200 to get them through the off season. And then there's the situation where the individual has a significant life changing event in their life. It's usually serious injury, illness, or a total loss of job. And we will pay a more significant amount during that period. Because of rising costs in everything on the island, we've raised our minimums to a maximum of $6,000 a year for non-seniors and non-injured individuals, and $8,000 for seniors on a fixed income, someone severely sick or injured who has no income for a significant period of time. We have a grant that helps us with a portion of that, but you've heard this. This is what we do. It's what we've done for many years. It's interesting enough. The statistics they change slightly from year to year, but generally last year we were helping people average age 45 years old. So it's, not the younger folks. They've lived on island for 13 years. So they're not the new people who have just arrived. 36% of them are single family households with one income. 15% dealing with significant illness, and 16% elderly. The only thing I would say of note, what made last year different than previous years, is that we have seen a shift in housing, and I think that's a positive situation. We are beginning to see more people living in apartments than in shared rooms, and that's an indication that what the town and the private sector is doing is working. However, we still have the problem that if they're in market rate apartments, anything happens to them, they need help. John, is there anything you want to say? I could go on forever, you know me, but.
I just want to confirm that when you look at a situation, you always make sure that the accommodations where they are staying are legal.
Yes,
Because this is, we talked about this many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And it is really important that any funding that we are doing will help with respect to accommodations that are legal under the bylaws, because we cannot fund it any other way.
right. If I can, I'll look at town records. And during COVID, when the planning was closed, it was a little bit difficult to get to. But even where there's some suspicion that there's many times you'll look at the town record and it says, I built a rec room, or I built an office. I will tell the tenant that I need to see pictures. I need to see the windows.
Right.
I need to see the entrances. I need to see the entrances with the doors open. I want to know where they're going to. I need to know if, what the cooking facilities look like. So we're looking at that. Can something slip through the?
No,
Absolutely.
it's very important. I just want to make sure that we have a number of new commissioners to have them be aware that what we're doing everything to make sure that we are never doing anything that would be against the town bylaws as a process, because it's really very important, because we are dispersing public funds. And as you are, and so we want to make sure that the use is appropriate within the laws of the community.
The last thing I want to see is open the newspaper and see someone died of carbon monoxide in the basement and we pay the rent. That's the last. I don't want to see that.
Questions for Janice and Tom? Eleanor.
Well, I'm very interested, and I saw that you put it in bold in your report that you see an improvement in the quality of housing that your applicants are in which they're living. I'm just curious what you say towns. Can you be more specific about what you think? Do you think it's the Richmond stuff coming online? Do you think it's tertiary housing becoming zoning compliant? I mean,
it's predominantly the new housing coming online. And right now, Richmond has brought on a significant number of apartments. And we have seen it. We have seen.
Affordable housing trust fund
Right,
brought them
right,
in
right.
at affordable rates to start with.
Right, but again, if in the market rate ones, or if you're at 2,400 or 2,500 or 2,600, and you need a little bit of help, that's what we're there for. We don't see too many of the only time we would see someone who is in the ones that went through the lottery or in the 1,200 and the 1,300 rent. We're only going to see them if someone's significantly ill.
Yeah.
And we don't want them to get out of there because
I
they're
know.
going to go back to a shared living situation. So that's why we help with that. And it's just significant to me because if you would look at my previous applications and you look down at the chart, you would have seen room, cottage, a house, room. Now it's room, apartment. So people are moving into those new
And one of the
locations.
things, people come talk to us before the home trust and the real estate office and say, well, why the hell, why aren't there more apartments? And I said, the answer is very simple. Zoning did not allow you to build an apartment. I mean, it was not possible to build an apartment on the island because people wanted to have a community that had single family homes. And so it took us almost a generation to discover that we didn't figure out how to have an apartment. And we have a long way to go to catch up. But we're working really hard at that in terms of making those available.
smart growth.
Yeah, and even and it's Richmond and there are others, there are other,
No,
folks have, there have been a small number of folks who have moved in and find that maybe the rent is a little bit higher than they anticipate they could, because they, you know, they showed their summer income when they moved in. And then they do what they're accustomed to do. They bring somebody in that third bedroom. So particularly with those newer ones, my reaction is your name must be on the lease, and I'm gonna go talk to them and see that name is on the lease, and if their name's not on the lease, I can't help, and you're more than likely to get evicted because you're violating the lease, so I think you should take care of the problem.
But you don't do site visits, you just verify paper.
I do site visits very, they're not the norm. I can get enough information with pictures, with conversations, with talking to landlords. And after all these years, I've seen the same addresses over and over. Yeah, so, and Richmond, I know Richmond, I mean, you know what's there. And even with some of the others, you know what's there. So.
questions from the commissioner? Did you ask for enough?
No, but I'm just very cautious. To break the 300,000 mark was like, I can't do it, I gotta stay. I'll go with 5% and because I know because I don't know, but now I don't know. I mean, if inflation continues the way it does, and if this community is like every other community, the rents are gonna rise. And this year, I mean, I looked at last year, we did 357,000 something in rents for 110 people. This year, I anticipated it would be a little more, but I also know that I had some dwindling, lingering funding from other locations, from particularly COVID, that hadn't been used, so I have that in the bank to cover this year. Then I went back to 2024, going back to 398 versus, you know, what we did last year. I don't know. I mean, you tell me. I don't know.
Dawn and then Mark.
Are you allowed to go above that 8,000 threshold?
Yes, I mean, we have a board, an advisory board, and if I think there is some extraordinary circumstance that we need to go above that, and I think you'll even see it in the charts, there were times when we went above.
Okay.
And that usually means there is some significant issue with the family.
Yeah.
I can't give you names, but I'll give you an example of a family with a during COVID, child was born with COVID, born with autism. Mother cannot work, father is seasonal. The child is going back and forth to Children's Hospital every 3 months. That's an expense of which we'll pay a piece, but not all of it. Yeah, we're gonna help that as long as that situation occurs. Or senior who all of a sudden is trying to get into some of the affordable housing, senior housing, but the wait list is and the rent keeps going up. We're not going to abandon that person. We're going to go over if we have to. But I will tell the board that we're doing this and that's why we're doing it.
Mark.
Do you ever have to turn people away for lack of funding?
I wouldn't. I would look at the funding and say, yeah, I'd like to give you 1,000, but I'm only going to give you 800. I mean, I wouldn't, I think we managed to budget because if.
So you make it work with the funds you have.
Right. And if we have any reserve from a previous year, then I'll go back and use that. So yes, no, I have, in the early years when we were just starting, the answer to that was yes, but I've learned how to move. I've learned how to deal with it. You know, Tom will be dealing with that to some extent in the next year. We'll work to budget. If I can't afford to give you X, I will give you Y, but So far, so good.
No,
I just want to say, I like this program. I've always liked it, as you know. The one thing that I do know that I do, so I trust you and your judgment. You know, over the years and the way you've had to like vacillate in terms of like people and their needs and all of that. You know, I know that when you come up with I've seen you go 50 to 45, now you're at 275. I said, well, she's doing what she feels she can do. And I know that you're managing it very, very well. You've been doing it all these years. I really trust your judgment on that.
And I
Thank
think,
you very much for your service.
thank you.
Yeah.
But even, you know, the community rises to the occasion, and the COVID
Yeah.
period is an example of that. If I went to a funder and said, look, we need a little bit more, particularly private foundations or
Yeah.
whatever, in a crisis, I think we could get it.
If you don't mind me interrupting, like my whole thing in the community, and I know that I always talk about the number of people in our community who have needs. It's always growing, regardless of what's going on. You might do 50 here, and then you have 60 more that you know that will give you 10 more over the last 50 that you had. You know, and so I know that is always there. So as far as I'm concerned, there will always be, and there will always, unfortunately, be a need unless something unusual happens. And we
Yeah,
don't
last,
have-
I mean, I noted in the,
Yeah.
which was a surprise to me, that
Yes.
last year there were 48 new.
Yeah.
Now, you know, you've lived on island for 13
Yeah.
years, the average age is 45, yet there are 48 new people in the mix,
Yeah.
so there you go.
Exactly.
are there any other questions from the commissioners?
This is not needed for the grant, but it wasn't published by the time we submitted the grant, but if you'd like a copy of our annual report, it talks about all the programs. It's there. There's a piece of it in the grant, but it goes beyond.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hearing no requests for any additional information, thank you for, as always, a very thoughtful and careful presentation on an issue that is really critical to the survival of this community.
Thank you, because
Okay.
we wouldn't exist without you, and I think you know that. I'm still on schedule?
You're still on.
Yeah.
Thank you for this.
Thanks,
Because I'm the one who called and said, do you advertise in the community preservation committee? You said, you know, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Public meetings.
Oh, no.
Okay, we are
How you doing?
2 minutes ahead of schedule, so we invite you to come sit down. You've been here before.
Yeah.
You know the drill. Take about 10 to 12 minutes to flesh out your presentation, any additional information that you want. And then we will open the floor to the questions from any of the commissioners with respect to what you presented to us.
Thank you very much for having us here.
You'll identify yourself.
Oh, I'm
The microphone's right in the middle there.
Okay, I'm Kathy Kelm, the director and founder of the Nantucket Island School of Design and the Arts.
And I'm Denise Allen, administrator for NISDA, work with Kathy.
Okay, so first of all, we really want to thank you so much for your previous support. So much has been going on, and I just want to bring you up to speed a little bit as to what's been happening. You gave us support for the silo. And finally, after much planning, structural engineers for the silo and planning, last Saturday, a gigantic truck came from the Midwest with the only staves in the country that are the correct staves to actually make the silo look like it's going to look like it is now. It's going to be absolutely perfect. And that was quite a process to have that huge truck come on, bigger, I think, than Stop and Shop trucks. It couldn't get down the driveway. Okay, it couldn't, the radius was too big. And we had been told that we didn't need priest detail because the,
Well, when
people
it
would be
rotates.
able to take care of it. But anyway, what happened is that we were doing, there were lots of people coming and going to Great Point. So we were traffic control for 3 hours and it was kind of fun, actually. We were waving at everybody. And then the other thing is the dairy barn is looking so handsome and secure with that and also the long shed. So we are very, very appreciative. And as you know, we're coming to ask your support for the last phase of 3 phases of the heifer barn returning to the farm. And on your cover, you'll see a picture of the farm as it is now. And then if you look at the lower one, it shows the heifer. And just before we moved onto the farm in the 70s, Dr. Voorhees moved the heifer off of our property and onto the place where he had a house because his wife, Mary Voorhees, is a quilter. And he decided that he'd have a quilting studio. So it actually was on our site initially. And we, in working with Brian Pfeiffer and Mary Bergman with the easement that was required, had the thought to put in that we would like to recreate at some point the historic profile and actually build a new heifer that looked like the old one. But then we had great news. The land bank called and said there are new neighbors, which is terrific. We're very excited about that. And we're working very well together. It's just amazing working with Jesse and previously Eric. And what happened is I was talking to Eric and he said we were going to be neighbors. I said, we're so excited. He said, yeah, but we have to move that barn. I said, do you mean the heifer barn? And he said, yes. He said, do you want it? And we said, yes. And that began the process. And it's been much bigger than we ever thought it would be. The sequence of events that had to happen in order to make it happen. So what happened initially, if you look at your grant, there's the letter of introduction, and then the back page has a really clear outline of what the budget has been for the total project, which is it's $1,356,807. And putting that together, it's a combination of several things. One is that gratefully, the land bank gave us the heifer. And we had kind of looked into what it would cost to recreate it, and it's much more than 720,000, but we put that in, that's the value. And the great thing is that when Dr. Voorhees took it over there, it's in such incredible shape. And inside, he actually did a whole interior design, and it's aesthetically wonderful because it's it is a barn, and they used that context to do the interior. And they actually created a textile studio for Mary, and we have textiles and we need space for textiles. So the interior is really useful. Then on top of it, we were talking about how we have so many projects going, and often when we get funding, most often, there's additional costs than what we had thought we were going to have. And so the land bank contributed 100,000. And that is for the move, okay? Then Val Oliver helped us out with doing planning. And then we actually have paid 164,882, and it's more than that now, in order to make this happen, because there was no way to have it happen unless we did that. And there's a specific outline of what we have paid out. So we are coming to you in hopes that you'll help us with the 3rd phase, which is 367,920. And what that is for what you'll see on the page across from your grant. It is for actually replicating what we need to realize that's required by the NPT easement to return it to its original historic detail. In other words, when Dr. Voorhees took it over there, he took off the historic barn doors. The windows have been changed. The cupola is off. And there's also a connector that takes the barn from where it's going to be sitting on its original site. And it connects it to the silo, which is existing. It's standing alone. It's waiting for the barn to come home. And so we need to do everything that we can to do the doors on the end, we need to put in new windows, the cupola and the connector, and that's what this is requesting. Let's see, I think that that's basically what I'd like to share. And would you like to take it a bit further?
I mean, that's pretty, the only other, I mean, with any construction project, there's always, we found this out with our other projects that, you know, you're digging, you do this, there's always something more. So it actually probably will be more than what we're anticipating. Drainage issues like that. But we hope to follow our timeline here on page 107 to have this project. The heifer barn is due to be moved in 2 weeks. It's already in the way. The foundation is being built right now.
The foundation is actually poured.
Yeah, the
yesterday.
foundation's poured. They're going to be repinning it so that the footings are exact. So when they slide, you know, it's going to move and go right onto the foundation. So, you know, without any hitches that we don't know of yet, this is, you know, our timeline is to be done this fall, you know, by December. And then hopefully with your funding, we can address the historical elements to bring it back to its original glory.
Which we're required to do.
Right.
By MPP.
Right.
Mary, are you in agreement with MPT's representative that the plan that they have will meet the requirements that are existing in the existing historical preservation?
Yes, so we had, as Kathy, Mary Burton, Executive Director at that Nantucket Preservation Trust, and Kathy said, we had discussed with Mr. while the easement was being recorded, a plan for either the reconstruction or move of the barn, and in order to fit the requirements of the easement, the barn will have to be restored. The changes that Kathy and Denise have mentioned, and our easement committee has preliminarily reviewed and approved those plans. That was a contingent start. The move of the barn was contingent on our approval of that. So we approved that and the HCC did. So I'm in full support of it.
Thank you. How many of you have been out to see the barns and what they have done so far?
I have.
Everybody else.
Okay. You need to do it. It is just extraordinary in terms of what is being recreated there from a historical perspective, but also the beauty of what was done early on in way before us. It's just an amazing thing that we've been able to, with Kathy's work and our support, to bring this back to life.
And having the land bank next door with the farm, it's gonna be
Literally.
open. They've already taken a lot of the privacy hedges from when the pearls were there are gone, because it's gonna move and it's opened up, and it's just really, they feel the historic significance of that properties.
We are so grateful to be at the farm, to have even found it for the school. And I'm just going to give a little teeny sidestep. What happened is that there was a reuse committee for the Navy base, and there were going to be 3 colleges out there: Rhode Island School of Design, us, NISD and RISD, BU, and UMass Amherst. And the reuse committee changed. They said they would. We went to the GSA HEW, and we had 2 years of negotiating. And the reuse committee changed. They approved it. And then the reuse committee changed in the fall and said, no, they didn't want to do that. And we lost the building. It was that little red building that was out there.
Yep.
That was going to be NISDA. And 10 years later, it fell into the water.
Yep.
So that was a blessing in disguise. But the other thing is, we had a whole summer session enrolled. And I thought, oh my God, where are we going to put this? And I found out about the barn, and that was the beginning. So you never know, you know, but the community loves it. They walk in and they come out now, they drop in and they say, thank God it's still the way it used to be. They breathe a sigh of relief, you know?
Yeah. Dawn.
It's kind of unrelated, but how are you doing with your housing?
Oh, yeah. It's all integrated. It's not really. Yes, what's happening is that, as you know, we sold to the land bank and to the town, the property downtown. And we are in the midst of reestablishing the housing out in Walwinet. Molly Ziklis gave us 3 acres of land in 2000. And then Jack Dunn, who was then building inspector, came and said, Kathy, there's this couple on Squam Road and they have a little cottage. Well, it ended up being 2,000 square feet. It was on Squam Road, right? And we moved that on and it basically has been there. And we have had so much going on, we couldn't establish it too much. But thank God it was there. And now we have that land and we've been able to take 2 of the cottages that weren't too damaged because we kept being flooded down. And these cottages were structurally sound enough because Mr. Grossman, when he had them built, I guess his friends built them. They each built a cottage and they were on cinder blocks. I mean, they were hot, they hardly had anything. There were 2 that were just a little bit higher, and every time it would flood, it would go under rather than in. And so we have those, and we're in the midst of beginning to restore those, and they're actually considered historic as well.
Terrific. Any questions from any of the other commissioners?
I have a question. I have a statement, which I think that it is impressive that we have an original farm that with the silos and the barns. And where it is located is a perfect place, can be seen from whatever direction you come. And I think it's something that we can be, and this can be very, very proud of, that they have put it together and made it work. So I thank you as a resident of Nantucket and on the HTC. It's a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's
Thank
our
you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Mr.
Hearing no other questions or any requests for any additional information, I want to thank you for your presentation. And we will get back to you after we go through our process of making recommendations and agreement amongst ourselves as to the things that we're going to be bringing forward to the family.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, 8 minutes ahead of schedule. If anybody needs to take a bathroom break, there is the restroom here.
Can you pass me those? Thank you.
You to sleep yet?
I'm ashamed to say several times. It is an.
Mr. Chairman, when is our next?
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. Good. The microphone is got
Owl.
thing in the middle of the table.
Perfect.
And so introduce yourself and speak loudly so the people that are on Zoom can hear you. We ask that you take 10 to 12 minutes to flesh out your presentation, and we'll be open to questions from the commissioners.
Of course. Hello, everyone. I'm Carlisle Jensen. I'm the Executive Director of Egan Maritime Institute.
Yeah, Chuck Allard, and I am the manager, the director of the museum, Shipwreck and Life Saving Museum.
And we are here today to request some funding for our Nantucket Maritime Collections Preservation Project. And I thought, Chuck, you can explain a little bit about our collection and what we're trying to do with this.
Right, the collection consists of the artifacts, documents that were collected by Bob Caldwell when he founded the shipwreck, or called initially the Life Saving Museum in 1968. It was a pretty extensive collection, and he added to it in the years that he was in charge and was with us. When the merger took place, or the acquisition by Egan, we brought together the collection that Bud Egan and his wife Dorothy had put together, which consists of maritime art and artifacts related to the maritime history of Nantucket. This was a good combination because while the museum had quite a large collection of documents, photographs, and artifacts that were used
in life-saving and other maritime activities. Bud Egan and the foundation had the vision that would have that together made much more sense, which was to instill in residents and visitors a really deep understanding, and I purposefully use the word deep, understanding of the uniqueness of the sense of community, the sense of self-sacrifice that meant from the earliest time we had volunteer lifesavers who obviously risked their lives to save others for clearly no expected reward, through the U.S. Life-Saving Service, which had 4 stations on Nantucket, to present-day Coast Guard. So there's something fairly unique about a lot of coastal and island communities, but Nantucket, because of its focus on the sea from the very beginning of its European history, it makes it pretty special and quite important. So that's what we see to be our mission, to make sure that visitors, residents, and people from around the world understand the importance of community and of self-sacrifice.
Yeah, so this project particularly is looking at the collection of the foundation and of the Life-Saving Museum and digitizing it. Right now, we have acquired a lot of artifacts, particularly one-dimensional documents, art, photos that are really important part of Nantucket's maritime history, but they haven't been archived in digitally. And we would like to do that in hopes of kind of our long-term plan is to make them accessible and to make it so that we say we want to put up an exhibition, we easily know what we have and what we can do. And also kind of grow an online presence so that folks who come to the museum who might be interested in learning more, they can easily go on our website and peruse our different documents. So we've done this with our 3-dimensional objects, and now we're doing it with our more one-dimensional objects. As an organization, we are really investing in figuring out how to update and enhance the museum experience. And through doing that, this is an important part of it. We have Chuck, who's wonderful, and then just 2 years ago, we hired a collections manager as kind of a big investment in figuring out how to best preserve what we have, and really take the time to make it accessible to all.
Tony.
Yes,
from
that's
the
Tony.
NHA.
Yes, yeah. So Tony, who was at the NHA, is now with us full time. And it also allows us to work with different community organizations. Right now, we have a lot of our collections is up in different spots, like the police department or the high school, and we want to be able to mix it up and change it up. And right now, we just truly don't know what we have and don't know, what kind of story we want to tell. So through archiving it, we'll be able to figure out what story we can tell, and do some of the back work. That's all for us. Does anyone have questions?
Eleanor?
After you.
Yeah. I need to point out that unfortunately, we cannot pay salary.
Okay.
That is not something that fits within if you have someone else overseeing it,
Okay.
supervisor.
Yeah.
If that person exists, you might be able to amend your application to us, but it can't be salary. It's got to be a supervisory role or a role with respect to utilizing the equipment for the digitization.
Okay. So even if it's someone who's on our salary, it would have to be a separate sort of consultant.
Well, I mean, I don't know how to
Yeah.
get an answer for you. The fact is that I'm just suggesting that if you
Okay.
can figure out how to, in fact, get some remuneration from us to supervise this,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
something we could consider, but it can't come out as salary that we can pay, because we cannot do that.
Okay, that's good to
I mean,
know.
we were talking about, in fact, we were just talking
Yeah.
about it this morning, about having, we have just one volunteer, about training volunteers, which would obviously fit into that category.
That's right.
Training.
Something like that could
Yeah.
work.
Okay.
You would be able to amend your application and get it to us by the end of next week.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
that's
sure.
good to know.
Okay.
Any, Mark.
Did you all consider using someone else's scanner and camera? It's gotta be on the island. I mean, NHA and I don't know who else, Hvac kind of, those kind of toys.
Yeah, so we.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, we did, and we've talked to NHA and that we've used, we've asked them to do a document or something. But the fact that, like we have about 3,000 or 4,000 photographs, I mean, the inconvenience, to say the least,
Mhm.
of not having it accessible when we had the people to do it. And of course,
Yeah.
NHA has it because they use it all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to, yeah, no, but we certainly have taken advantage of their generosity. And, you know, when we had a special need, let's say. Unfortunately, we have a lot of special needs.
Yeah, we looked into the Boston Public Library. Often we'll do it, or you can send the documents
Right.
to Boston and then come back. And we realized that it just made sense to do an initial investment in the equipment, and therefore we can have it be an ongoing project instead of this sort of one and done project.
Eleanor,
So as someone who very frequently uses the online
Yeah.
NHA
Yeah.
Yeah.
archives, and maybe this is addressed somewhere, I didn't see it. Are you having, in addition to your photographs of whatever the object is, are you gonna have a sort of a detailed blurb of everything about that object that could be useful and interesting and indexed and so forth?
Yeah,
Like the
I
Barney
think-
thing is really great. You can
Yeah.
punch in a keyword and it'll take you to X number of examples and you can click on it. That's-
Right, I mean, that would be our long-term objective. For example, we're in the really early stages of trying to figure out how to do and making some inquiries. How to put together a database of all of the men who served in the 4 life-saving stations. So someone could do exactly what you're saying. I wonder, you know, my great uncle, I'm sure was at the Nantucket station. Well, it'll turn out he was in Hull, but in any event, they'd find out he wasn't by using this. And
Yeah.
that is one of the objectives, is to make it accessible. Right now, it literally is impossible for someone. We had an inquiry just the other day, looking for a letter. And I know we have it, I know about where it is, but it wasn't, I couldn't say, just a minute and I'll pull it up for you. And that would be the really way to respond, I think.
Yeah.
any other questions from any of the other commissioners? Hearing none, then I would ask that if you so choose.
Yeah.
To provide us with an amended request.
Yeah.
By the close of business next Friday.
Okay.
So that we have the opportunity to consider it as we look at the allocations that we make relative to our proposals to the county.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We'll definitely get going on that.
You obviously have a lot of reading to do.
I know.
That's overwhelming.
Well, you see, I think this is one of the most interesting committees in town because we get to hear stories that are so different.
Sure.
And are so much related to the 3 categories that we deal with, which is historic preservation, housing, and open space. And you can't have much more impact in terms of what's going on in this community beyond those 3 categories.
Yeah.
Right, that's right.
Just to give you a bit of background, Lena, we have done, how many projects have we done over the 20 years that we've been around?
Over 250 projects.
And how many,
How many years?
and how many millions of dollars? Have we
Over 50 million.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Thank
And
you.
the most important thing is that somewhere between 10 and $20 million is money that we got from the state to do all this that we would have never had if we hadn't existed 20 years ago.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's really quite extraordinary in terms of, some towns haven't done it yet. No, I know. I mean, they were totally
Yeah.
asleep at the switch. And in the early years, we got 100% match from the state of anything we awarded. I mean, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, no,
Forward
thank
that
you.
document to me.
Okay, I'll send it directly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now I'm gonna give you guys some homework, okay? We're gonna check and see when we can find a date that works for everybody in terms of getting together. And it may be, you know, in some years, we've been able to do it in one setting, and in other years, depending on how complicated it was, we might have to take two settings. But what I'm gonna do is tentatively see if we can find two dates that so that we set them apart. And what I will want each of you to do is to go through this particular chart and as you're going through making your suggested amount with respect to, because what we'll do is we'll go around to each of us, we'll discuss each one, and we'll get input from each person with respect to who they think they are. And some of them it may be very simple, others it may be very complicated. The idea, and what I will do is before that meeting, I will draft up the form of the resolution that needs to be done, so that you can see, and I get around to it, so you can see the language that I'm filling up with these things. And I really want each of you, goddamn, read it and tell me that whether or not I missed it or something like that, because it's really very embarrassing, you know, when there was some technical said it, and said, Jesus, how the hell did you say that? Anyway, so
And the way, with any idea how much money we have to spend?
no, well, the thing is that we have our CPC surcharge, will come to very close to about $1 million. Okay, and we probably close to 2 we have the ability to take money from the state in terms of the funds, the monies that we've gotten back from the state. Part of what I'm working with Kathy is finding out exactly how that breaks out, but we do have a lot of money. We do have a lot of money, but what we have done in the past is, first of all, we have almost no money in any of the specific categories, because we spend that first, okay? But what we've done in the past is we kept $700,000 to $800,000 separate and apart, okay? With respect to so that's there, if something can come hell in a handbasket, we don't have, so at least we have around $700,000 to be able to.
In undesignated.
In undesignated. Okay. But my guess is that we may have slightly over $1 million in those undesignated reserves from the last 2 or 3 years, because of the significant additional contributions we got from the state. I mean, because last year, what do you know what it was? It was almost $1 million.
It was almost $1 million.
Almost $1 million that we got from the state.
But sitting
It's
there.
a lot. This year, right?
It'll be a lot this year as well. So part I want you to understand that we do have this money, but what I want to do is I want to get a better involvement next year, because I thought we were going to have more than 6 applications this year.
That's my concern, the open space recreation.
The
Are we-
open space.
Were we setting aside something to like 10% or something?
No, see, we have to set it. You have 10%. But for instance, like on the open space category, we were able to get in to create the new pickleball courts out there. Okay, and so and I was working with Mike Kozart on the house for the kids. Okay, and so on our house, and what I said to him, and he just didn't get a chance to do it. But I said to him, what you can do is take the model that we did for the pickleball courts, and you'll redo the tennis court and stuff like that. So you come up with something that we create for open space. Whatever it is, you know, we can build that out there, and it goes into recreation and open space. All right, so there's something that if somebody's interested, can work with them to help develop it, because of the fact that you might want to take that on as your charge in terms of talking to them and say, this is, and just take a look at what we did with respect to the pickleball court. You could just, not a significant amount of different change in terms of the applications is to get it done. So that we find ways that is usable open space as opposed to open space.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would like to see the town or Halkeen or some combination thereof do an application for next year to do a playground at 6 Fairgrounds on that vacant parcel that's adjacent to the
If-
watch out.
if we do 6 playgrounds.
Oh, boy.
We can still have the fun show.
But the good thing about a
I
playground is,
just need to say.
yeah, but the good thing about a playground is if we had the space,
No, I
the
know.
thing that
We
thing that CPC can do in terms of playgrounds, they can, they can build a playground from start if there's no playground there. That's a good thing.
I'm
Yeah.
keen on
But
the No Deer Farm field house, which I was, when I was on the soccer board, we talked about it, but it was dropped.
Well, no, but the nobody farm still
being built.
is there. It's being built. I mean, the money was allocated.
Now-
We spent over $2 million to build a goddamn field house. It should have cost $300,000 or $400,000 if
Yeah.
it gotten passed the first time.
Yeah.
But, you know, but we got into a negative conversation between certain users of the.
Yeah.
facilities with respect to what they thought it should be.
The field house is a history lesson on the CPC, where, you know, we had
If
the
you want
money.
to see everything that you
Yeah.
can do wrong, watch
Yeah.
look at the history of the field. house.
Yeah, we had the money, we used the money,
allocated
we
it.
got used and abused.
And they never
Yeah.
spent.
But the
it.
2 years, so the 2 years. So
But
now,
now, but now the town has to spend the money to do it. But the thing that I want to say is this, about this year, if you don't mind, excuse me, if you don't mind. The only thing I want to say about this year is this, I read all of this. The other thing that I want to say is, all of these, and I've been looking all these years to see something like this. These are all repeats. We were saying, when are they going to start repeating? Because we did the Athenaeum, we were looking for the Athenaeum to come back. And I imagine over the years, sometimes they are all going to come back. These are all repeats with the exception of the Egan Maritime.
yeah, phase 2, 3.
Yeah, so, if you look at these applications, except for the little things like the salaries and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
it's-
Well, but that's why.
People know what they're doing.
That's why I want to
Yeah.
reach out, because
Yeah.
the fact is that there is not a heck of a lot of historic preservation left to do.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we've done most of it over the 20 years.
Yeah.
And so there, one of the things that we have been able to do is we've been very creative in terms of stretching the rules as to what you can do through the CPC. I mean, the rest of the state follows guidelines that we have ended up saying by coming up with interpretations that were clearly very creative and very interesting, but everybody says, hey, these are the right things. So what I want to do is our committee reaching out into the community to organizations and say, these are the 3 categories, you know, can you come up with something that you think you can fit yourself into?
They're all nonprofits, so it's not a rule.
Well, the thing is,
Yeah, give us those spark notes of, like a punch list of
well,
what you
no,
can do.
the thing is that you
The no-nos?
basically have to, then, I mean, we can't do it for private enterprise.
I'm thinking of the Pacific Club.
Well, if the Pacific Club can set up a 501c3,
Yeah,
they
they won't. My family's got one of the shares. They won't do it. I beat on them saying it makes sense, but.
We had the same thing with that building on the corner of India and Center Street
Century, yeah,
that came in.
yeah.
They didn't want to do it, so and they were actually going to get the money. Right on Indian Center, on the same side of the Africa,
Mariner
hospital.
House.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a problem, but the fact is that there's a reasonable amount of money, and so you need to do some steps to in fact help yourself be able to be eligible. So anyway, I really want to thank everybody for the amount of time and energy put in this one. I thought this was a really good meeting. I think we had a good dialogue, and the reason that I wanted to have this being in person is that I wanted the community to be aware. Again, this is a way to make them aware of us in terms of the fact of what the hell is going on and stuff like that. And that's really important to do, to in fact make everybody out there understand that we're here for them, and it's our job to do it, to figure out how to do it. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Nice seeing you guys.
You gotta roll call it. You have to roll call it.
Happy birthday to you.
No, you gotta roll call that vote.
Before we roll call.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, everybody. Now roll call the vote.
Ethel, Dawn,
Aye.
Eleanor,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Linda?
Tim?
Aye.
Tim?
And Diane, I think.
Diane, I.
Mark?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thanks.